the stories and how the Sinhalese writers had to take a little thing and expand it. But but actually then I had to cut, and so you always have to cut at some point, and then you have to lose favorite characters. And one of the characters I was kind of sad to kind of greatly reduce was Pasenadi, the emperor of Kosala, because he's this big fat glutton, and he's always chasing women, and then there's Siddhartha, his best friend, who's also the very opposite, and there's this kind of, he teases him, and I can't remember, he had a nickname for Siddhartha, Owl or something like that. I put all this in, and it was kind of, probably the comedy in the book got lost, because the problem is that it's, this idea of the fire in a novel, where's the fire in the novel, and if you go too far from the fire, the novel grows cold. And the fire in the novel is Yasodhara and her point of view. And so she can't inhabit that. And you can't really tell that through storytelling, like somebody telling her a story. So I had to cut that out because much as I was enjoying writing it, it was too far from the fire.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to turn it over for questions now from the audience. We have 5 minutes, okay, here, Artika.
Fabulous session, and thank you so much for this. My question to you three is, why are you writing history? And with Shabani's books, I have recommended them to grade 9 students to read as extras. But how do you make history accessible to students? Because what you read, what Christopher said as well, was 13 years you didn't get to read all this, and then suddenly, we all have to grow up to discover history? Thank you.
Well, I think of I don't really think about students because I'm not writing a young adult novel, but I think about myself at, say, 13 and everything I'd read, and so you're reading well beyond your age limit. So I don't really think specifically about accessibility. I think that intelligent and curious young people want to be challenged. They want to sort of feel their brains expanding by reading something that actually might be a little out of their ken, out of their knowledge. But that's what I remember loving reading at that age, because you could read this stuff that was really not meant for you.
Yeah, history, as we were taught in, I grew up in India, was always more or less dates and battles and things like that, right? We all read the Second World War, we all read the First World War, and I had no idea that there were Indian soldiers in the First World War, men in helmet, men in turbans in these trenches. All we knew is, the tale of the Tommies and the war poets. And I just felt this was such a gap, because so I started the research. I didn't know much myself, but when it was the centenary of the war, I felt I needed to do this. So I did it. I literally did it to find out myself about the Indian story. And since then, it's just following the stories. I'm not a military historian, so it's the personal stories of the people that I followed. And so many schools wanted me to come and talk about it. So children's school, I'm talking about the UK. I found them so interested because we have a big expat community. So there are descendants of Sikhs who were once in the wars, and they know nothing about it. So even I'd say 14, 15-year-olds were interested. Then my book, of course, Spy Princess, which is a biography of Noor Inayat Khan, that's the Second World War. There's always been fascination. School level, I find, I'd say 14 plus, they really love it. And when I go to a girls' school, my God, they lap up this story. It just energizes them, So I think history should be made so accessible. And it's something I keep talking about in the UK, that please put these books in the curriculums, about the Indian Empire, about the role Indians played in the First and Second World Wars. Because when I say India, I mean undivided India. So it's Pakistan, or Nepal, everything. And, more and more, I find a lot of interest. So I'm quite hopeful that they will like these.
Well, it's a very good question, I think, in terms of kind of relevance, because people sometimes think that's history, you should know that, and then sometimes, why do I have to know this specific thing? Well, because you should, and I think it's good to ask that question. I mean, when I started writing, for example, I didn't know why I found the story interesting. I just found it interesting, and I assumed that maybe someone else might also. Only later I realized that, for example, talking about colonial context, I realized that, oh, okay, so it's not only, of course it's important to know about it, but why is it so important to know about it? And I think it's because it's still so relevant today. It's still very much there, and it's maybe not there on the surface as much. It's not like many more countries have become independent and they're doing their own thing. But like how on a deeper level we often talk about, we say like the colonization of the soul, and it's something I found really interesting, discovering that within people who used to be colonized, but also people who used to be colonizers, and it's again both souls. It's so deep that it's like really hard to get out of it, like it's almost impossible. So it's very interesting to look back and see like, oh, that's where you got this idea from. You think that these people like that because it has been around, that narrative has been around for a while, and why? Like, who benefits from that? So that I found interesting, but then I realized, for example, personally, last year I went to lots of places in India, and I went also to schools. There's one image of me where I'm like drowning between school kids, because afterwards I wanted to have like a signature, and I was like, it was my 5 minutes of fame in my life, I guess. But it was a very like pleasing experience, because I did definitely not expect that when I was writing the book in Berlin for some German readers audience, that people would connect with it so well. And I'm now experiencing the same thing again here with a theater company that we are working on adapting the thing for the stage in Colombo. So I'm like, okay, you don't even expect what connections can happen, but surprise, surprise.
Thank you for that. So I'm afraid we don't have time for any more questions. I'm being told to wrap up. So thank you very much, Christopher, Sraboni, Shyam. And Shyam, thank you for giving your time on your birthday. A very happy birthday to you.
Happy
To do this.
birthday. It's out now. Yes, big happy birthday.
Mike.